everybody got AIDS and shit.
Let's just start with the movie behind you, Showgirls.
I saw that movie in the theater when it was brand new. I'd heard all the buzz about it, and I kind of knew going in that it was already rumored to be a bad movie, that this was a bit of a disaster in progress. And I went and saw it, and, I enjoyed it. And, I could certainly recognize that there were, bad elements to it, but I didn't think it was as bad a movie as what people were maybe suggesting. People were talking about it maybe becoming a cult movie, and I think the studio actually hoped it would become a cult movie so they could maybe make back some of their money. But to me, it wasn't bad enough in a way that it would become that kind of a cult movie, like some of the other ones on the list here. But I had known the director, Paul Verhoeven. I'd seen a lot of his other movies. I mean, Basic Instinct had been a massive success just before this, and I had seen that one in the theater as well. And you could make a case for that one having some kind of bad elements as well, but it works. It works for what it is, and it's very entertaining, and it obviously was a big success. So I guess Showgirls, it was kind of like, this is the movie he wanted to make. After becoming successful and kind of having the power, he decided he wanted to make this. And I was puzzled, I guess, as to why did you want to make this movie? But yeah, I remember going to see it in the theater and thinking, well, it was entertaining. I wasn't bored,
Mm-hmm.
And later on, I watched it again and started to appreciate it more.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? How did you first see Showgirls?
Yeah, for me, this was kind of interesting because there was a lot of hype when this movie first came out. And Paul Verhoeven is the director that I loved coming into this movie. RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct. I've watched those movies a zillion times prior to Showgirls coming out. RoboCop was like, amazing to me because I was so young when it came out. It was like, oh my God, like RoboCop, and all the violence and the gore and the way he killed all these people at the end. That whole scene where he got shot up, it was just so violent and over the top, and it was so funny too. And that's the thing with Paul Verhoeven, is that he does have a lot of humor to his movies. There was a commercial that kept playing in RoboCop all the time. I'd buy that for $1, and there were a lot of callbacks, and where the guy gets killed at the end, and he's like, RoboCop can't kill cops, but then he says, you're fired, and then he kills the guy. There's a lot of humor to Paul Verhoeven's movies, and it's a lot of dark humor, satiric humor. And when you watch that and like Total Recall, again, Total Recall, it's silly, it's over the top, it's schlocky. Now, Basic Instinct wasn't a schlocky, and as a kid, believe me, I wore out my VHS of that because of all the nudity and the sex and a young Sharon Stone. But I loved him as a filmmaker. But what always confused me about this movie is, did he intend for it to be silly? Like, was this a director trolling us? Because you look at the type of movies he made, like, he didn't take himself seriously. And then you look at the movie he made after this, Starship Troopers, which again, it's schlocky. But for some reason, everyone predetermined in their mind, the guy who made RoboCop, the guy who made Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, pulling like that giant ball out of his nose that came from his head, and like, he has the mask on with the woman, where it it opened up and it was his face under it, and all the silliness, the woman with 3 boobs, all the silliness of all of his movies, and Starship Troopers with the giant cockroaches. And they decided that this filmmaker made Showgirls as a serious art movie, and like, we have to make fun of him for being an idiot director who made this serious movie that we all think is bad. I just don't know if I don't know if what we got was his intention, or if it's legitimately a bad movie. Because to me, I just think it's a dark comedy. But I will say, I have heard reported that he intended this to be a trilogy, and she was supposed to go on to another city which they kind of set up at the end of the movie. And that makes me think, then, dude, do you really think that this movie's gonna have a sequel? Maybe they are right. Maybe you are crazy. So for me, I'm always torn on like, did he intend this to be schlock? Or, did he genuinely was a good director that made a bad movie? Like, where do you stand with that?
Well, that's a good question. And I've heard that he does talk about it very seriously, and he has a lot of explanation for things. Like first of all, I think the idea for him was apparently this was his MGM musical. This is kind of what he wanted to do. He wanted to make an MGM style musical, like really big budget spectacle, like a classic MGM movie. And so that's kind of puzzling in itself. But then the show in Showgirls, like the show that they're performing in Las Vegas, which is called Goddess, I just find it to be weird. Like, I don't understand that show. And they keep showing the same opening sequence of it over and over again. Whereas I feel like in a real MGM musical, you would see different musical numbers throughout the movie. But we get that opening repeated again and again and again. And I don't even get it. I don't understand what it is. But apparently Paul Verhoeven can go into great detail explaining the meaning of it all. Like, it has very deep meaning, what we're watching here in this Goddess show. So
that's what makes it so
this...
perplexing, because he's such a talented director. Like, why is this the sword you're gonna fall on? Showgirls? And some of the lines that they say with earnestness, like, it must be weird not having guys come on you. And that scene was played so earnestly. I'm like, dude, like, look at the dialogue you're reading. How can you say this with a straight face? And like, with the tone and the music and the point in the movie it was, I'm like, they intend us to take a line like that seriously? And let's talk about Nomi. Is there ever a scene in this movie where she's not running into the room or running out of the room? Like, me and my friend were watching this movie one time. I'm like, dude, is she gonna run out of every scene she's in? And then we started like monitoring it, and it's like literally at the end of every scene, she's like, like running out of the room, or she's like, running into the room. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, why are you so spazzy? And why does anyone like you? She's so unlikable. It's like she has no redeeming qualities to her at all. I don't like, why are people so obsessed with her? And like, her way of eating French fries, was that an artistic choice? Like, stabbing it into the, like, is there a deeper meaning to that? Is like that a knife? Is like the French fry a knife, and like the ketchup is like blood, and it's like some flashback to like her killings? Like, I just the choices were just so odd. It's so fascinatingly bad, and he is such a good director. It just, I'm more fascinated by this movie than like 2001: A Space Odyssey, because it just makes no fucking sense.
Yeah. And the more you watch it, the more it becomes fascinating. The more you notice, the more you see these little details that just don't make sense. And you're right. Like, why does anybody like her? But everybody who meets her seems to immediately like her. You know, everybody immediately wants to help her. But she's constantly pushing people away. She's very abrasive. She's very rude. The guy bails her out of jail, and she's rude to him. She won't go for coffee with him. You know, she's a challenging person. You know, why does anybody want to be around her? It's very interesting.
She's an okay dancer, but she wails around like a fish all the time. And that sex scene, she's just like,
yeah.
And the dancing is just like, what? Like, why is she better dancer than anyone else? You know?
Yeah. Well, those two sex scenes, those are kind of, that's what really sticks out in my memory from seeing the movie the first time, was this almost inhuman sex scene. You know, the two of them, you know, that are, it's like, does anybody actually behave like that? Does anybody move like that? I don't know. It just seems alien. It's like she becomes an alien being in those movies, in those moments, I should say. The guy who is the serious dancer, who thinks that she's got talent, and he wants to put her in the show that he's created.
He had one of the lines of the century. Man, everybody got AIDS and shit.
Yes. But he apparently wrote this show for her, And meanwhile, he's really down on the fact that she's working in a strip club, and he's kind of, telling her she's better than that. But the show that he's written is basically an impression of strippers doing lap dances. Like, it's really the same thing. Like, why is this art and what she's doing not? Like, it doesn't quite make sense.
In a real movie, like a real good movie, I should say, not a good bad
Yes.
movie, his show
Yes.
would have actually been something good.
Yes.
And it would have had some good numbers in it, and that would have been the number we saw at the end, where
Yeah.
she leaves the main production because they're so corrupt and this and that. She has a
Yeah.
name for herself now because they built her up as a name. She
Yeah.
leaves them because they were okay with her friend getting raped, and then she puts on this show that he wrote. Yeah, they may not be together relationship wise, but they look past their differences, and they put on this show that he wrote, and it's a spectacular show. And
Yeah.
they take all the strippers. It's like, today we're closing down the strip club. Boo, boo, boo. We have the show. Boo, boo. They're throwing tomatoes at them, and then they start putting on the show, and you get the slow clap or something.
Yeah.
All the dudes, everybody loves the show, and in the
Yeah.
back there's like some critic getting a lap dance, and it's like, oh my god, this show's amazing. He calls his favorite, something like that. But you're right, the show he did
Yeah.
was fucking awful. Like, all of
Yeah.
it's awful. It's like, you're right, if he's gonna treat this as like a real musical, like, get some real people who can like help these people coordinate like some real numbers, get like great camera angles that's showing it like innovatively, because some of the 30s musicals, like, they were like much better shot than this, with different, more creative angles, and they look more spectacular. And fuck it, they're in Vegas. How many Vegas shows look more spectacular than this that they could have just emulated, or just have the actual Vegas performers and just like a few actors learn it for the close-ups and just have like an actual Vegas show on. But you're right, the actual show that they have, it's just nonsense. You're just distracted by boobs, but it's not any good.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned the rape there. I just have to say that rape scene is so violent and so nasty, and it's so out of the blue, and it basically happens to the only character in the movie who's really likable and sympathetic, right? And she's so brutalized in this scene, and it just makes no sense. Like, why would this have even happened? Like, the guy who does it, he could probably have anyone, and it's just, he has his bodyguards participating in the rape, and it's the weirdest rape scene I've ever seen.
They could have done it and achieved what they wanted in any other way would have been better. Like, there are a million other ways they could have achieved that rape scene, or they could have achieved her being jaded about that guy, or like gotten to the end result of Nomi leaving them because she thinks they're sleazy. They could have went from A to B in so many better ways than they did. One, he's a good looking guy. Two, he's famous. Three, she was more than willing to do anything he wanted. It's just a matter of like his guys getting sex with her as well. They could have just implied that they had a sex scene, or just show it the sex scene, because they show us a lot of nudity and sex anyway. So they have sex, and she's like, and he's like, hey, by the way, like, and his guys walk in their door, and then it's kind of implied that she did it because she liked him, and then maybe he leaves her, and then she feels like shit, and that could have been enough. Or maybe she decided she didn't want to, and then he pulls her back in the room. But the execution of it was just so cartoonish and unnecessarily violent. And violence is cool. Like, I love, like, I Spit on Your Grave, or like stuff like that, but that's a different tone. That's a different movie. This didn't fit the movie you're watching for like 90% of the runtime. It was just odd. So mean-spirited to, like you said, the only likable person. Usually when you do something terrible to a likable person, it's to create a villain that you want to follow for the whole movie and see him get his. Not someone you introduce at the end of the movie that you have no emotional connection to, that's just there for like 2 scenes. It's like, why do we need to hate that guy so much? It's not the main villain of the movie. It's like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Just one of the many things that doesn't quite make sense in this movie.
No, it does not. It does not. But she does love her burgers. I will say that.
She does, yes.
I don't know if that was a fetish thing, but she had a lot of burgers in that movie. So Uh, uh, uh,
Yes, true.
on the positive though, she now in the day and age we're living in now, for actors to get into incredible shape is not a big deal, especially with PEDs and stuff like that, and the science of it, and like personal trainers. But back then, that's pretty impressive. Like you didn't see that a lot, where actors can transform their bodies or become a great. I don't know how much of a dancer she was or how in shape she was, but she did a pretty good job of being a credible dancer in the movie. So I will give her credit for that. She was in great shape.
Mhm.
A lot. She was nude for a lot of the movie. Whatever you think of her attractiveness, she got her body into incredible shape. She was very tight, um, and she went all in. You know, a lot of people that have
Mhm.
body doubles, or they'll play a stripper and they won't go nude. I'm like, I'm cool if you don't want to do nude, but why play a stripper? Like, there's been so many actresses who played strippers. It's like, just don't play that role if you don't want to do the nudity. It
Mhm.
just doesn't make sense, you know. But she was all in, so I
Yeah.
give her credit for being all in, for getting in shape. I'll give her zero credit for her acting because it was atrocious. I don't know if it was the choices that she was given to make, like, but whatever her choices was for some of those love scenes or some of her anger scenes where she's just like mashing up her food and throwing things around and storming in and out of rooms. It was just odd choices. And she would just go from like 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye with no progression. There's no subtlety to her acting. So her performance was trash. Trash in a good way, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. If you haven't seen it, I think it's worth a watch. It's not that sleazy. I mean, there's a rape scene which just came out of nowhere, but despite the nudity, I don't feel the movie was really that sleazy. I don't think it really exploited the women. They were just nudity was just like it was so nothing to the actors and to the characters. It wasn't played off for like, you know, jerk off material or for eroticism. It was the world they were living in.
You take care, kid. Must be weird not having anybody come on you.